This is a dangerous groups that we're dealing with now. It was a nightmare.
Flight 807, you're clear for landing, runway 7, Bravo.
All personnel report to the nearest tornado shelter. This is not a drill.
If you need help, then dial your operator.
Have no fear, fellow citizens. The Mediator is here.
Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of The Mediator with me, your host, Brian West, here to give you the top 8 headlines and developing news stories that made in this week. Now, as usual, I'll give you the top 8 local headlines and developing news stories that made in first, followed by a movie clip, a skit, a trailer, or something that's going on in the community, or maybe some pictures. And then I'll give you the top 8 international headlines and developing news stories that made in this week. So let's waste no time, folks. Let's get to it. Story number 1. The Covelli Center and Amphitheater hang on with a federal grant. They're hanging on. Now, with the COVID-19 stories dragging on, a federal grant has helped the Covelli Center and Amphitheater stay afloat. Now, this story has entertainment districts on watch because without an audience, entertainers can't eat. That means they can't get a crowd. Go Tato, it's your birthday. And with cancellation shows, the cancellation of shows, venues that house these events cannot make money. I'm sure you get how it works. This story has entertainment enthusiasts in suspense as readers sit and wait to see if the virus postpones or cancels any more shows. And cancel shows by not only costing venues, because if you cancel more shows, this will not only cost venues money, but it will upset a lot of good people who live off of a packed venue. It means they're making the money off of packed venues. So if they don't have seats in those stands, they don't make any money. In the meantime, they spread the wealth around. Now, for many entertainment companies, the show must go on. So some have proceeded, but they're still not making enough to make to break even. So that's why story number 1 made it in this week. Story number 2. Tracey could make history in Youngstown if she upsets Youngstown Mayor Jamel Tito Brown. The major talking point in this story is the question of if the election were tomorrow, would Tracey Winbush win? The countdown is on for the next mayoral election in Youngstown, and Tracey Winbush could make history if she wins. Here are some history points. History point number 1 is that she could possibly flip Youngstown to Republican. I don't think that's ever been done in a long, long time, if it has ever been. The next historical point is that she will be a female mayor. That's another history point. The last historical point is what everybody hates to accept, and that is the fact that she is an African-American female. So she has a chance to make 3 historical points in Youngstown that it could possibly shift, and that's what's at stake. Now, the amazing thing about this story is how much momentum could be brewing because of the current political climate in Youngstown. And each party in this election has something to prove because Youngstown has been seeing a declining population and morale has been low because of crime, but people are still hopeful for the future. So this could really be another big election. That's why story number 2 made it in this week. Story number 3. Why does the Valley have drug issues, and why is weed on the ballot? Now, the weed man is now pushing papers to get more rights to deal with his business of dealing with weed. Now, the thing is who is actually making money? The weed man, the pharmaceutical company. Somebody's making money off of all of this weed that has all of a sudden become popular in the medical business. Now, weed slash marijuana, stashes of marijuana, weed all over the place. These activists seem to be fighting even more for the right to get high locally, while conservatives and other prominent figures scratch their heads and wonder what is so important about weed and why are people so amazed with it. This is a strange story because weed fanatics have just all of a sudden become activists at the voting booth because of weed. Now, marijuana stories are somehow staying alive locally, and with medical marijuana facilities fighting for more pull in a very competitive and strangely lucrative market, this story is back in the headlines. So, weed is somehow on people's menu, on people's resume. I mean, you look over time, we went from say no to drugs. So, how did this happen? And that's why story number 3 made it in this week. Story number 4. Local schools still duking it out over COVID-19 procedures. Local school parents have been duking it out with board members over COVID-19 safety protocols. Boardman schools, if you didn't check this out, Boardman schools made some headlines because parents were concerned about their children having to deal with mask mandates. This was a big headline. Now, the constant pressure to dip and dodge COVID-19 is what got this story in, because in all of the COVID-19 confusion, most parents have made it clear that students should not be forced to wear masks, but they don't have the final say. Now, mandates have already crippled a communities, if you want to be exact, that have already been dealing with high poverty rates. So a lot of people just want this COVID craziness to be over. Now, there are also stories in circulation about rising COVID-19 cases amongst kids across America. So this could be why high-level officials are making such big decisions when it comes to kids. But the story goes on because the growing confusion eating away at the story seems to be what works to protect children from this virus and what doesn't work. Now, the debate now is what method is better. You have some methods. The vaccine, that's a method. Mask, that's a method. Then you have the one of just treating COVID like the flu, just letting it ride its course. I mean, it's a high survival disease. I mean, well, virus. It got a high survivability rate. So why don't you just let it run its course and see what happens? Now, these stories are still developing because of these 3 facts. What can you prevent and what can you stop this virus with? That's why story number 4 is such a big headline. That's why I made it in this week. Story number 5. Local COVID-19 cases are back on the rise. So what does that mean? One headline that can't seem to be ignored is a report showing that 7,000 COVID-19 cases were reported in one day. Now, this is what has the story buzzing. Now, the more that cases keep rising, the more the COVID-19 story stays alive. It's been a long time. Now, for an entire year, COVID-19 has been in the news, and as long as the story stays alive and data keeps coming in, doctors, staff, and other health officials will continue to have their hands full, which I'm pretty sure they're probably very tired of this problem. Now, what the story means to the people trying to stay on top of things is that ideas handed down from the top level, the people at the top have really stirred up in the minds of common sense thinkers. That means you have a lot of schools of thoughts battling it out. Story number 6. 29 people shot in Youngstown so far. What is Youngstown missing? Big headline. The city life is wild, if you haven't known by now, and Youngstown has been getting a full taste of it. City wildness, especially around the summertime. Now, with the fall season just around the corner, Youngstown remains on the radar because people keep either getting shot or getting shot to death, and that's not good for any city. Now, in the midst of this madness, rumors are creating a lot of speculation in a variety of circles on what is causing crime to spike. There are so many rumors out there, but no one knows what to believe at the moment. Story number 7 in the top 2 local headlines and developing news stories that made it this week for you to keep you informed. Coming here all cleaned up. just a smile at the camera for you. Does Youngstown have a gun problem or a systematic problem? Something is up in the city. Gun activists seem to be in a gridlock they're trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work. Young people are turning to weapons to kill other young people, and innocent people keep losing their life. Now, what is real about this story is the fact that the gun problems are real, and it's not going away anytime soon. They're not going away anytime soon. Now, locally, people have been seeing this story come to life full scale, and it does seem to be leaving the news. It doesn't seem to be leaving the news anytime soon. So I don't see these gun stories leaving. Now, over the past few months, gun stories have dominated the headlines. Babies, young people getting shot, teenagers, and this saga continues. And that's why story number 7. Being top 2 this week, that gun problems are really staying in the headlines. Story number 8 in the top local headline and developing news story that made it this week. Does the Valley have enough good paying jobs? Good question around Labor Day. Do we have enough good paying jobs? The world keeps spinning with or without a good job market, but the Valley business climate is a very important topic that has to be addressed now. Shutdowns killed a lot of progress, folks, and if anyone had it bad, or maybe already had it bad, then most likely they got it even worse now because of what COVID has done. The local job market is such a trending story because of uncertainty. People are uncertain. They don't know where their next meal is going to come from. And at the moment, people are just trying to break even. Jobs and career opportunities have a lot to do with this story. And the question in this story is if the Valley has enough high-paying jobs to create any type of sustainable growth in what seems to be important at the time. Now, what we have to keep in mind is that a lot of businesses took out PPP loans to hire people, but for some odd reason, these businesses, we don't know. Only time will tell if they can account for these people they've hired, and on top of that, be able to pay for the loans that are unforgiven if they took out such a high amount. So story number 8 is, you can see why it made to the top, especially around Labor Day, where people are trying to get back into the workforce. Some people have given up. Some people have turned to drugs, some old habits. And this story just staying alive. And it made it to the top this week for that simple fact is that the jobs are popping up. You've got temp jobs. You've got jobs all over the place, but they're still having a problem with the job market. And then you have the fact that does the Valley have enough high-paying jobs to be able to keep the bills paid for people? And that's why story number 8 made to the top this week. Those are our top 8 local headlines and developing news stories that made this week. I'll be right back with the top 8 international headlines, so don't go anywhere. You're in the Mediator. Me, Brian West. I'll be right back. Welcome back. Now it's time to get to the top 8 international headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. So let's waste no time, folks. Let's get to it. Story number 1. Clever, high-tech, and an abundance of career paths. So what is the problem? What's the problem? Young Americans for years have had to deal with finding the right career, but the problem seems to be just that, finding the right career. Investing in yourself is costly, folks, in a country with an abundance of career paths, and the fire to achieve is still burning in a lot of ambitious young people looking to make things easier and better for the future, but this all comes at a cost. Now, student loan debt is still an issue, and the more this story lingers around, the worse it will get. Now, being informed about programs already in place to assist students is the key. That means we all could use something from these, from being informed about student loan debt. Now, everyday individuals and people are finding clever ways to get through the debt storm. Now, college debt is so bad. This is a but, because college debt is so bad that this could be why schools are trying to find better ways to make it work for their students. That means scholarships, incentives. Now, the more word gets out about college debt, the more people are catching on and finding better ways to make it work, make better decisions. Some parents and some students are just opting out, period, which we don't know how this could affect the future. And that's why story number 1 crept its way in this week. Story number 2. COVID-19 could be draining other important and relevant funds. Social Security is just one of the funds making headlines that could be affected financially by COVID-19. Stories about growing cost of COVID-19 have been slipping into some major financial news stories. Now, economists are very concerned about the growing fear that the government could be draining money out of other needed programs just to account for COVID. Now, this story is still developing, so keep an eye on it. That's why story number 2 made it this week. We need a social safety net. And if COVID-19 drained that social safety net, we could be in some social safety trouble. That's why story number 2 made it this week. Story number 3. America just took a U-turn on its war strategy in the Middle East. It is official that America is out of Afghanistan, but not without a huge cost. Some news about some pricey equipment left behind made a lot of headlines, and the death toll is also a factor in this story. After 12 servicemen were killed, caught a lot of people's attention. Now, in a war, accountability is everything, and the war on terror, although thought to be dead, to be out of the news, could be creeping back into a lot of news headlines, especially around the 9/11 anniversary, which we cannot forget. And we cannot forget those who fallen, especially the 12 soldiers. Please remember them. One news story says that over $80 billion worth of equipment was left in Afghanistan. That is not good news. Now, this is definitely not good news for anyone holding office or any American war strategist, because if somebody else gets a hold of that that equipment, it could be very, very catastrophic in the future. Now, this story is still developing because of that simple fact. That's why story number 3 made it in this week. Story number 4. Texas has some major bills on voting and abortion in the news. This is big news because abortion is still a hot topic. Now, abortion and voting laws are staying alive after Texas could be putting up a fight to make it illegal for women in that state to abort a child if a heartbeat is detected. That means that child is alive. Heartbeat is detected, and they don't want it to be put down, which is not what seems to be a good idea, especially when you're talking about human beings. Now, voting rights are also hanging on in the headlines. Voting by mail, cracking down on partisan poll watchers, and rolling back local voting initiatives that are put in place has made it, which the incentives that have put in place to make it easier to vote, which many feel has a lot to do with color and racial matters, if you want to be exact. That's why story number 4 is so important, because each of these topics are hot topics that everybody are debating about. Because if you take away somebody's right to vote, you could be changing the future, and some people, a group of people, could be deprived. If you talk about women's issues and women's their bodies and abortions, which I've never really been in favor of, but women do have a point about their bodies and the decisions that they make. But we all seem to be having a voice in this fight, and at the moment, Texas is leading the way in keeping this story alive. That's why story number 4 is a big, big headline. Well, those are our top 4 headlines and international headlines and developing news stories that I made this week. I'll be right back with the top 4. So don't go anywhere. You're in the media with me, Brian West. I'll be right back.
If you want to check out the stories that almost made it in or did make it in, go to our Twitter feed on our website. Check out everything. All of the sources are there. And go to the website. It's METHOD, the number 8, INC.com, method880.com.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Now it's time to get to the top 4 international headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. Well, let's waste no time, folks. Let's get to it. Story number 5. How are America's landlords doing? This is a big question. If you assumed that the job of a landlord was good, making good money, getting rich, then it may be wise to think again. Landlord troubles have been staying in the headlines, especially after being forced by the government to allow their tenants to occupy their properties and stay put even after falling behind on their rent. Now, this has put a sour taste in the mouth of property owners trying to stay ahead of mortgage payments. Landlords and tenants have been in so many mind-boggling headlines, with some landlords going to the extreme to get the point across. That means there was a story about a landlord that I reported on the top 8 a few weeks, some time back. He went into his tenant's room, broke in the house, and put them at gunpoint, took them out of the house, and evicted them by throwing them into a graveyard site. So, and he did some time for this. So that's why story number 5 is such a big headline, because landlords are still going through a lot, and that's why I made it in this week. Just for them. I think about you. Find me a home to lay my head, and don't evict me, baby. Ooh, don't evict me, girl. Story number 6. The Biden camp is back on defense in the midst of the Afghanistan catastrophe. Joe Biden's approval ratings have taken some big hits over his handling of Afghanistan. One article in The Atlantic tries to cover the story from a different angle, but whatever the war strategy is or was for the future for the future fight when it comes to the war on terror, a lot of attention now is centered around a failed state with a lot of money spent and a lot of lives with nothing to account for but what many say looks like an embarrassment to America's 20-year ride on the Afghan wave. Now, there is a lot of mystery surrounding this story, and it has really been a morale killer when it comes to the military engagements. A lot of veterans who have served in Afghanistan feel that they have wasted a mission and achieved nothing. But they have to stay encouraged, because this is not a good story when you're talking about engaging in talk about the business of war and foreign affairs. But it's good. It's going to be around for some time. It's going to be around for quite some time. So if you know veterans out there, keep them encouraged. Story number 7 in the top 2 international headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. Yes, I am sitting up in the middle of the night getting top 8 stories just for you, and I've reached the top 2, so I'm almost out of here. Story number 7. Over a year's worth of news devoted to COVID-19. That's a long time. Americans and the world are still in a COVID-19 prison. America thought the vaccine was the answer. Then came news that COVID variants were coming around. Now, with cases back on the rise and a year's worth of news devoted to the COVID-19 effect, this COVID-19 crisis that we're facing just won't go away. Professionals feel they have solutions, but with so many cooks in the kitchen, nothing seems to be working at the time. Now, the only hope now seems to be the data on the survival rates. The survival rate could be the deciding factor on where the future fight against COVID-19 goes. In a year's time, COVID-19 stories have remained in the headlines. That is a scary talking point. A whole year of COVID. Story number 8 in the top international headline and developing news story that made it this week. Fire! The top! Inflation plus poverty equals a disaster, and COVID-19 has everyone confused. Poverty is not a good sign of progress. When kids are missing meals and parents cannot afford to feed them, the world has a serious problem. Inflation is yet another gut punch in the fight against poverty. Most economists remain optimistic, if you want to just look at this, they may remain optimistic, but what could you be optimistic about, especially when you believe that there is temporary inflation, and everything is just temporarily for the moment. But they're trying to stay optimistic, and that's the good thing. So you're saying that this little wave we're riding is going to be temporary, and that's why you're optimistic. So I'll stick to that. Let's hope that's true. It's just going to be temporary. We're just going to have some temporary rises in prices. Everybody just cool down. You got to pay a little bit now, but I guarantee you'll pay a little less later. We thought that in the 90s, and now gas prices are up at $3. I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news, but COVID-19 has really confused a lot of investors. Most of the concern now is in the amount of spending brought on by the feds just to try to make ends meet. He's just printing out a lot of money. Now, as long as the money talks continues, this story will stay alive. One piece of advice headed into the holiday season will fall on how likely people and mainly Americans will be able to save money. If Americans can get enough cushion to save, there could be some light at the end of the tunnel. Just maybe temporarily give us some relief economically. But at the moment, this seems impossible for some families because stuff is flying off the shelves, and they got to restock that stuff now. So question in this is, could another stimulus check be the answers to struggling families? Could that really get the economy back stimulated, or get it at least another boost? Well, I'm sure they're working hard to figure that out. Well, those are our top 8 headlines and developing news stories that made it this week, folks. I hope you got something out of today's program. I always get something out of doing the research. As usual, I'd like to thank all the news outlets and journalists, the people on the front lines, the media. You deserve all the credit. I am just the mediator, the man in the middle who comes in here to give you the 8 top stories to review, look at, learn, and dissect. If you want to show us some support here at Mediator, it does not take much. All you have to do is visit the website on the screen, buy something, click on something, watch something, read something, or just sponsor a program. Once again, I'd like to thank you so much for tuning in this week. Have a good week. Have a good holiday. Stay safe, and show some love. Soul love. Well, I'm out of here, folks. Thank you for tuning to the media this week with me, Brian West. Have a good holiday, folks. Peace.
Have no fear, fellow citizens. The Mediator is here.